Hi everyone, All Designs here, and this is part 4 of the Tamiya 1/35th scale M4A3 105 HVSS build. So in the last few videos, we've been discussing the decals and how to apply them, how to make them look more real and such. And this video is pretty much the ending of this segment, I guess you can say, of the decals. Now we're using just the decals right from the box. These are just Tamiya decals, right out of the box. And I had a few questions on them. Do I find them too thick? Are they nice? I find them just fine. But it's all in how you use them, I guess you can say. Now, my technique is, I guess you're using a bit more material than normal, I suppose. But I find the results to be, fruitful, I guess you can say. And, that's the end result. And if you go back to my other builds on my Shermans and such, you be the judge. So obviously we're going to be finishing up the last stages of the decals here today. Obviously the model's not done, so we're going to carry on the builds, but I'll show you how I did it anyhow. So if you go back to part 3, obviously we're discussing the clear coat and how to apply it over the clear coat and such, and then let it dry. Now obviously since that video, we're going to be working with the flat coat and the weathering portion of it. Now the tracks and such were put on after the flat coat and the weathering, so everything I'm talking about today does not include the tracks. These were put on after. Well, I'll talk about the tracks today, but everything I did with the decals were put on before the tracks, just to let you know. So anyway, getting to the decals. So after the decals were applied and dried, I did the paint chipping, as you can see right here. And there's a little bit there and there, and then I applied my flat coat. Now you don't have to use a flat coat. This is just the the TS80 flat coat. You can use the TS13 if you want. You can use a gloss coat. Don't know why you'd spray a Sherman with gloss, but you can. Whatever floats your boat, so to speak. But I use the TS80, and it's very important to use a clear coat. I had a question the other day saying, do I have to use a clear coat over top my decals? And no, I guess you don't have to, but it's very important. I think you should. And obviously there's a couple of reasons. One, it will seal in your decal, right? As you can see, it looks more molded into the tank. It looks more painted on, as you can see. And two, whatever materials you're using for weathering, the chances of it getting underneath your decal and lifting it, it's almost nil. I get not 100% because, there's a chance that this stuff might not seal it in 100%, right? But some of whatever you might be using for weathering might be really aggressive on a decal, right? And so just consider that. Also, too, some people use, and I'm included, use this stuff right here for weathering. And if you don't use a clear coat, I know a lot of people will try and hide the fact that it's a decal with the Tamiya weathering sets, and they'll over weather their decal, and then the model won't look right. So I like to use the the finishing flat coat, especially on this model. Depends on what you're building, and it seals in your decal quite nice, as you can see. It seals it in really nice. And again, these are just right out of the box decals. No aftermarket decals here except for that one, and that's just to make my tank look more unique, right? So okay, so now we're on to the flat's dried on it, and it's important to do your paint chipping before applying your flat coat, right? Because obviously you're opening up the decal again. So you sprayed your flat coat, now it's sealed down again. So now I like if your can is empty, these lids right here, it's all nice and sealed in here, so these make good, painting trays type idea. So I like to use Optilong paints. Now we got Dark Rust, we got Starship Filth, we got Oxidized Blue, or like the copper, and we have, I believe, Industrial Earth. So I usually take a little bit of each color, like half a pinky nail, and mix it all in here with my what do you call it? Turpenoid. I order this turpenoid and make it like a soup, and then I take my brush, mix it all together, and then I go all over the tank with it. because it's like a soup. It gets all into the crevices and cracks and all over the model. It discolors the model completely. And then I take my sponge and I purposely cut the sponge like this, right? And then again, I dab it all over the model. It gets rid of brush marks and such. As you can see, like the logo right there, there's no brush marks. See if I can get in closer on this. And then after that, I leave it for about half an hour, right? So a good half an hour. And then I take this one and then I wipe it down. Not, you know, not everywhere, but most places. And that'll bring back that, you know, metal look to the tank. You don't want to rub it too much over the decals, because otherwise it'll almost get your decals white again. And you're going to want to leave your model now for a good couple of days because you're using oil paints, right? And if you do have to, you know, fiddle with your model, try and touch it in places that aren't going to rub, you know, off too much. But if you go back, you know, to part 1 to now, you're going to see all the layering now that you've done. Like if you have to touch your model, touch it here. But as you can see, all the layering that you've done is starting to pay off. And your decals, for the most part, look painted on. And if for some reason there's a spot on your decals that might not have dried right or whichever, you can hide that with weathering. Yeah, it's cheating. But for the most part, especially with these ones, right? These, I mean, if it's just using a star, that's simple, right? That's simple for decals. But because we're using this pattern, all in here is, you know, clear decal. So these ones are even harder to hide. But a simple star, that is uber simple. And then, of course, this one was even harder because it curves up. And this is a real late war tank, right? This is getting to be, you know, late 44, 45-ish, you know, mid 45-ish. And you can see this is like an aftermarket one. That's just like a kill count that I put on. And then this one here I put on. It says move out hour, we are after your ass. Just for fun. I think at this point they're getting a little bit cocky, right? But as you can see, with the weathering and layering, and we're still not done yet, right? We're still building this up. But the decals are now not white. And that's kind of what we wanted. So moving on to the tracks now, right? I was debating, like, again, I use the one, we're not done weathering these ones yet. I don't like using the ones out of the kit. Now, obviously, this has nothing to do with this kit, you know, or this kit. I actually took these ones out of my Easy 8 kit. And these are the T66 ones. Now, obviously, they make aftermarket ones, but they're really, really expensive, and I just didn't want to spend, you know, more money on this. So, and I didn't want to use my aftermarket T66 ones, because all my other builds that we're doing with the M4s, we've seen a lot of these style. So I thought I want to do something a bit different. So I sucked it up and I used the ones out of the kit, and I'm just going to have to really heavily, you know, work with these to build them up to make them look, you know, a little better. You know, luckily with, you know, with this, you're only going to see here and maybe a bit in there. But I really like these, and you do see this style of M4 with these style or the T60, the T66 or the T80, but I really wanted this, so I sucked it up and used the rubber ones. And the road wheels, if you go back to my Easy 8 build, again, that's just using a Sharpie. That is simple, right? Because if you look close, there's a little lip where the black meets the green, just take a Sharpie and go around the wheel, and then color the rest of the wheel in with a Sharpie. Spray it clear coat, spray it in the clear, and then the TS13, and then the TS80, and then that's how you do your wheels. So simple. Obviously, you got to sand your wheels. I found that every single one had the seam line going right around each wheel, and it's painstaking, especially if you're doing the HVSS, right? It's got a lot more wheels than that guy. But, just use an aggressive grit. I used that one right there. Just sat here, threw on a movie, and just sanded away. And luckily with road wheels, they get banged and scratched up a bit. You can't really go wrong. The camera's not really picking it up, but just sand that line away on each and every wheel. But I wanted the T66 track. As you can see, I've already started to weather it, but you can see that rubber. But again, depending on how I want to display this, I could easily fill that in with mud, because it looks like, and from the pictures that I've seen, it seems like mud just stuck right in there. And then the only thing you really seen was that top piece. And I can easily, put rust on that and fill the rest in with mud. Like it just got impacted. So that'll be easy. But that's it for the tracks, pretty much. And then I got to decide, the crew figures and things like that, how I want to, display this. And it seemed, from the pictures that I've seen, this one here, the M4A3 HVSS, it was more of a city tank, I guess you can say. Obviously, it was going, from town to town to town. So I kind of want to display this more in like a city atmosphere, right? It wasn't, a range tank, so to speak. I guess you could say it wasn't fought at range. It wasn't its intent. So, anyway, it's getting long. I just wanted to show you the last step in the decals. We're going to move on from here and start working with, we're going to start putting it together. Obviously, we've got to, finish the engine and such in the back, or the exhaust, you should say, more so, not the engine. As you can see, we've got work to do there. And then, obviously, work with the tracks as far as weathering goes, but I don't want to do that until I decide, how I want to pose this. I do have extra parts from my, sets there, my aftermarket sets with crew loading and stuff. They actually have things, if you look underneath, they have actually mounts right there where you can place them, and then you could put a crew figure sitting, right? So, or I can actually put just a piece of styrene across, and that would work too. But this gives me options now where I can have guys sitting and such. So many options, but it'd be kind of cool to see how I'm going to pose this. So I don't want to go too heavy with the weathering until I decide, how I want to pose this, right? Because I don't want to cover this thing in mud and then throw it into the city, right? Because if I'm going to throw this into the city, I want to do more, asphalt type, or not asphalt, but you get the idea. Anyway. Now I'm rambling. So anyway, let me know what you think. Please like, share, and subscribe. As always, it really helps the channel grow, and I look forward to your comments. Thanks, guys. Bye.